All right, Malcontents, it's that time again where Jennifer and I are going to do Malcontented Minutes. Malcontented Minutes is our speed round for news where we do 10 stories in about 20 to 25 minutes. Now, mods and admins, this is the time. You can go ahead and drop the link. What link? You get to control the news because we have a poll that's been put up. And on that poll are the 10 stories that Jennifer and I are going to do. You get to vote in that poll and pick the story that we'll go more in depth in at the end of the show. So, of course, voting right now is pointless because we haven't even revealed story number one. So you might want to probably wait toward the end, and then we hold off announcing what the story is until we get to the arrests in the insurrection update. And Jennifer, we got a lot of funky arrests we're going to be talking about tonight. It's like the best part of the show. Are we ready to do this?
Oh, let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. We do that. We do that. And we do that. All right, here we go. We're rolling. Story number one. We're back to the town of Hazeldale, Washington, where police have shot another black man under questionable circumstances for the second time in 3 months. There are literally no details that have been released at the traffic stop that went wrong involving 30-year-old Jenoah Donald. I hope I'm pronouncing his first name correctly. Thank you for your patience if I got it wrong. Of Vancouver, Washington. 4 officers were involved, with one reportedly firing their gun. Jenoah is reported to be brain dead and on life support with no hope for a meaningful recovery. His family has asked that the NAACP, or through the NAACP, that there not be any protests. In October, Kevin Peterson Jr. was killed by a drug task force, where multiple videos shot have now raised serious questions about the police account version of events. Both shootings are now under independent investigation in accordance with Washington I-940.
Yeah.
Jennifer, go ahead and unpack this for us.
So we were talking a little bit about, before the show got started, about what kind of demographic tends to populate that particular area. And I was telling you, my oldest child actually lives down there, and I lived down there for some time when I worked with racehorses. It is a heavily white, fairly conservative area. In September, I went down to visit a friend in that area. There was a huge Trump rally. There's a lot of far right-leaning people there. So this is extremely problematic, and I am very interested. We can't make too many assumptions right now because we don't have that much information, but it does not sound promising, and I'm interested to kind of watch and see what comes out in the next few days.
Yeah, one of the things that jumps out at me, Jennifer, is that most police officers will go through their entire career without pulling their service revolver.
Yeah.
2 police shootings essentially fatal in 3 months in a relatively small community. All right, that's time on that. Jennifer, we'll go ahead and start the clock, and you've got story number 2.
All right. So in the last week, a Louisiana library got a grant for a voting rights program, but its board, who's already kind of been called into question by the ACLU, rejected the money, started citing far left content. So what happened is Teresa Elberson, who was a library, put in for this small grant of $2,700 to purchase copies of 2 books on Black history and civil rights, and to hire a pair of Black college professors to lead community discussions on the titles. So what it was doing is talking about this kind of ongoing struggle for voting rights. And so it was supposed to open up larger dialogue about Black history and civil rights more broadly. But the board was like, no, we're trying to reinstall library neutrality and not, churn out information or support things that are too far left or too far right. Well, this has been problematic in the past because the ACLU of Louisiana has already come down on this board for, refusing to or voting against having what they call drag queen story time. Because, and I quote, the board said, when drag queens lead children's story time, a lot of hugs and controversy follow. So the librarian that received the grant and wanted to implement this program has resigned, and the board again is in trouble with the ACLU because they're basically trying to guise their own racism as neutrality.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. And the other thing is you bring up the issue of transphobia that's going on there. That is a topic that I am actually, Jennifer, you know, we talked about it before the show, that I am really steamed about.
Yep.
And we're going to close talking about transphobia tonight. Thank you for bringing us that story.
Mm-hmm.
Do better, Louisiana.
Yeah.
All right, our next one takes us to story number 3. And story number 3, Chicago restaurateur Robert Magiette, I hope I'm saying your name, Robert, and thank you for your patience if I'm not, was driving his car when he saw a lone tamale vendor shivering in the brutal January cold of Chicago. He made an impulse decision, made an offer that she couldn't refuse. He bought out her entire inventory of tamales right there on the spot. And then he got another idea, and he called out on social if anybody knew about any other tamale vendors that were out there that he could buy out. And the leads flooded in. So not only did he buy out the daily inventory of multiple tamale vendors and leave them, by all reports, a generous tip, but he then donated those tamales to the unhomed population in Chicago. He now plans to continue to do these tamale runs through the rest of the winter months. And a similar plan has now popped up, Jennifer, to do it for pizza.
Yeah, take note, people. That's called altruism. There's nobody being used as a political pawn. People are actually benefiting from somebody else's generosity without some kind of expectation in return. That's altruism. That is an absolutely wonderful feel-good story. I wish more people would do things like that. The benefits to the people who are out there, you know, trying to sell their products in a kind of harsh winter environment, and also people who are having to deal with that environment as unhomed populations and getting, you know, food out of that. Those are both really great things.
Yeah, it is a really great story. It makes me think of the ending of the movie Scrooge, where he was like, I get it now. You could just get a sandwich and go here, right? It was this whole, there was no strings attached. It was not just do something nice. And It is a great story. Jennifer, you can take story number 4.
All right. So locally, a Seattle student is helping seniors book vaccine appointments and encouraging others to do the same. 17-year-old Aaron Jaff of Lakeside School in Seattle has been using his extra time, as King 5 reported, to help book many appointments for seniors in his life who have struggled to navigate the complicated process online, because so much of this booking the appointments is online. And he was actually even able to help a 97-year-old World War II veteran booking an appointment, because the process, you know, you need to have at least a little bit of technological savvy to navigate the site to be able to book the online appointment, which of course is, you know, sometimes a struggle for people our age, David, let alone people much older. So he is actually part of the Lakeside Crew team, and they call the project the Vaccine Crew because they're actually really working on those ethics that supportive crew brings. So this is actually a kind of a nice instance of this kind of like privilege being used for a good cause to help seniors get their COVID vaccine appointments.
This is a great story, and one of the things that we'll have in our COVID-5 Fast Facts is we're going to be talking about the vaccination situation in the state of Washington. We talked about it on Monday, and we're going to have to talk about it again here on Saturday. So I don't want to kind of get ahead of ourselves on that. What do you mean people our age? What are you saying, Jennifer?
Okay, we're not spring chickens. Okay, David, I've had to come to the realization that I'm in my 40s and like 15 years away from 60. It's not.
So one of the things that jumps out at me on this, Jennifer, and I don't want to get ahead and reveal the punchline, but part of what people have to do is provide their driver's licenses, and the state of Washington did not do a good job with PII and the unemployment security. And so with that, we're at time, and if you want us to talk more about it, you can vote for that story. And just reminder that we have the polls. Mods, admins, if you could drop the link maybe one more time in there for the polls. just so people to get it. And again, you may want to wait to the end because you may hear another story and go, damn, I wish I voted for that one. All right, so with that, we're going to go to story number 5. And story number 5, Jennifer, comes with a visual.
Oh, God.
A Florida man with a Florida tattoo on his face was arrested in Florida after calling 911 multiple times, saying he needed a ride. That is not a henna tattoo. 22-year-old Matthew Latham of Hudson, Florida, called 911 4 times asking for a ride home. On the first call, Latham told 911, I fucked up.
This is written.
I'm trying to find a fucking ride home. By the 4th call, 911 operators kept him on the phone with until an officer arrived 6 minutes later. Pasco County Sheriff's deputies arrested the man and gave him a ride to jail for misuse of the 911 system and marijuana possession because apparently marijuana is still illegal in Florida. I have no ill will that the TV show Live PD is gone, but damn it, this was Pasco County. Jennifer, this would have made fabulous TV.
I'm still stuck on that Florida tattoo in the middle of his forehead. That's a lot. Yeah. What was in that weed is what I want to know. That made him feel it necessary to call 911 for a ride rather than like Uber. That is such a Florida story. Like, I mean, you literally could not make it up.
Power grid was shut off by Dickless here.
They caused an explosion.
Is this true?
Yes, it's true.
All right, Jennifer, let's go ahead. We'll pull you up and you can start story number 6.
Oh, this is kind of like cheesy gossip celebrity stuff, but because A-Rod used to play for the Mariners, it has a little bit of a local connection. So A-Rod is in the midst of a controversy a little bit with a reality TV star. And is denying that he actually cheated on J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez, with a Southern Charm, is the name of the show, I've never seen it, star Madison LaCroix, who claims she's been inconsistently communicating with the engaged baseball icon. Now, LaCroix has already made news because she had a relationship with, Jay Cutler, who is a mediocre quarterback. He is. While he had just recently separated from his wife, or maybe they were still kind of at the tail end of their marriage. So this is still kind of unfolding. Of course, A-Rod and J-Lo are showing some solidarity publicly, but there are, transcripts of conversations, and there have been phone calls, and it just basically goes to show that you can look like J-Lo and your fiance, boyfriend, whatever, might still be looking elsewhere.
So here's my views on A-Fraud, which should just tell you right out of the gate my views on A-Fraud. First of all, he screwed over the Mariners, and I had just moved to the city here, and I wasn't much of a fan at that time, but I really wanted to see the Mariners destroy the Yankees, and the Mariners friggin' choked, and I sat in the stands, and I watched that horror of playoff games when all of that went down. Then he went to the Rangers on that ridiculous deal and literally bankrupt that team. Thank you, George W. Bush, for running that one so well. And actually, W wasn't president at the time that happened, but he had already fucked up the team beyond repair prior to that happening. Yeah. And then he went to the Yankees where we had steroids and herpes and him sleeping with everybody, and he's just ick.
Yeah, he is ick. And yeah, this is just like, I don't care. I mean, whatever, but it's not, there's usually not innocuous or benign intent behind contacting another woman, and especially an attractive reality star woman, while you're engaged to what purpose is there behind that communication? Was he offering her advice on fame and celebrity? So I'm just like, whatever. You can
maybe he was getting relationship advice from a certain Texas police chief who is now in jail.
Yes.
And Tiger Woods. Doesn't he hang out with Tiger Woods? I think he does.
Yes.
All right, we're going to go ahead to story number 7. Florida. You're the gift that keeps on giving. Apparently, it isn't that hard to fire a police officer if misconduct involves another police officer, Jennifer. Then it could happen real quick. David Hernandez of Longwood, he said Longwood, Florida, was fired after mocking a fellow officer about her fears of catching COVID, hugging her against her will, and touching her personal belongings.
Ugh.
An internal investigation found that Hernandez was, try to contain yourself here, Jennifer, not fully forthcoming and not truthful, really, in his statements on the interaction with the other officer. Hernandez is really screwed up, Jennifer, because he's had 16 years on the force. He was just 4 years away from that pension money train. The police union, interestingly, has no comment on the ongoing arbitration. The woman officer involved elected not to press charges against Hernandez. You could get to unpack this shit show. It's all you.
First of all, some guy hugging me against my will, I don't care if you're a coworker or not, you're going to get a knee to the groin. Second, that's both borderline harassment and sexual harassment. Third, I shared an article with you guys in our news chat earlier this week about the ways in which women in predominantly male-dominated careers are still very much grappling with sexual harassment of various forms, because men don't like their presence there. And this kind of reeks of that. And her kind of willingness to not press charges may also be out of fear for repercussion.
Well, I bet I'm willing to bet a month of Sunday of paychecks that she is already dealing with repercussions. And we will probably never know, but I'd be surprised if she is with that police force 12 months from now.
Yeah, exactly.
And with that, Jennifer, you could take us to story number 8.
All right. Story number 8. So in some kind of good news, Biden is calling for expanded efforts to protect the LGBTQIA rights globally. And he basically signed a memorandum, which is, legally just for show. It doesn't really have any power, but it's wanting to expand protections for the rights of LGBTQIA people worldwide, including potentially through the use of financial sanctions. Hit them where it hurts, right in the pocketbook, right? He says, quote, all human beings should be treated with respect and dignity and should be able to live without fear no matter who they are or whom they love. And this is building on a 2011 directive issued when Biden was serving as vice president. It goes on to say, quote, the United States belongs to the forefront of this struggle, speaking out and standing strong for our most dearly held values. Again, it's largely symbolic, but it's a campaign that he pledged, a campaign promise to pass LGBTQIA rights legislation known as the Equality Act in the first 100 days of his administration, and to make this a top priority. The memo also directs U.S. agencies working abroad to work harder to combat the criminalization by foreign governments of LGBTQIA status or conduct, and directs the State Department to include anti-LGBTQIA violence, discrimination, and laws in its annual human rights report.
We had talked about this, I think, right when you had just started on the show, that one of the things that I had predicted is where former President Donald Trump, by the way, I showed him the respect as a journalist you're supposed to show him by saying former President Donald Trump and not just Cheeto Jesus or something like that. But former President Donald Trump basically legislated by executive order. And I think when you first came on board, one of the things I was saying is that there's really nothing to prevent Joe Biden from coming in and erasing most of the Trump legacy with a stroke of a pen. And that's basically what Joe Biden's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I was reading something earlier today before we came on about how, in comparison to his predecessors, the amount of executive orders he's issued in his first few days, and they're basically all trying to undo some of these really problematic things that Trump enacted during his presidency.
There's more I want to say, but we're gonna hold true to this. If you want us to keep going on this story, then you could vote, but you should. We got 2 more, so you should wait to hear what those 2 are. And with that, we're going to go to story number 9. New York State has repealed a 1970 law that was created as an anti-prostitution measure that was heavily abused, particularly by the New York City Police Department. The measure became known as Walking While Trans Law, originally passed to prevent loitering for the solicitation of prostitution, more commonly known by the derogatory term street walking. The vaguely written law was used by New York City police officers for decades to target minorities and especially the transgender community. With officers having no way of knowing what an actual conversation was going on, people were basically arrested for essentially looking the part, with transgender men particularly targeted. Because of discrimination, an inordinate number of transgender people have to turn to sex work because they can't find regular work. The repeal of the law is being hailed as a victory for the BIPOC and the LGBTQIA community, while New York officials issued a terse memo to officers to stop targeting people based on the law. HBO fans may remember the documentary series Hookers at the Point. Jennifer never really saw New York City police down there cracking down on that loitering law. You get to unpack this one.
So I'm actually going to plug a really great book written by a historian named George Chauncey, and it's called Gay New York, Gender, Urban Culture, and the Making of the Gay Male World, 1890 to 1940. It's a fantastic book. He goes through and details the longer history of all this. And like I said, it's totally worth the read, fantastically well-researched, well-written book about this kind of history in New York over the course of 50 years. So yeah, it's particularly interesting that they're, just kind of now doing away with this, because this is stuff that's been going on for more than a century. I mean, Chauncey talks about it in his book. So yeah, the fact that, this consistent targeting of trans people is still an ongoing problem just shows how ingrained gender stereotypes are in our society, and how people are so attached to them and just kind of very unwilling to do away with them, because there are so many people, particularly those of a certain age and I guess racial demographic, that fear change. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to talk about it more at the end of the show, as you know.
Yes.
And with that, Jennifer, you get to do the final story. And I would really say, as you're listening to this story, the polls are open. We're not going to close them until we get to the tail end of the insurrection update, right before we get to arrests. That's when, so you got plenty of time to vote. So with that, Jennifer, you can go ahead. The clock is operating.
So, of course, tomorrow is the Super Bowl, and it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Kansas City Chiefs. But a Native American rights group is planning a protest on Sunday, urging the Kansas City Chiefs to retire the team's name and stop fans from using an in-game tomahawk chop ahead of the Super Bowl in Tampa. So Alicia Norris is the co-founder of the Florida Indigenous Rights and Environmental Equality. It's called FIRE with two E's, and is one of the people leading the demonstration set to take place near Raymond James Stadium, where the Chiefs will play the Bucks for the championship. And so she says, quote, "The indigenous people of this land have already had a mass genocide approach with regard to their culture and its way of living." And she goes on to say, "And when you further dehumanize them and objectify them, it just kind of falls in line with the extinction of who they are." So a historian by the name of Patrick Wolf wrote this amazing article called Settler Colonialism and the Elimination of the Native, and he talks about the multiple ways in which genocide was committed against Native peoples by white settlers. And it's not just physical erasure, it is cultural. And this is part of what they're arguing is this is part of that cultural erasure. And it reinforces, again, problematic stereotypes that justify the consistent erasure and just kind of like brushing aside of Native peoples.
Yeah, whenever we and I'm sure we'll see some comments. If not tonight, we will probably see it after the show for sure. Afterwards, right, with people going, well, what about the Seminoles? And what about the Blackhawks? And what about the Seahawks, right? And it's like, the Seahawks worked with the natives people when they came up with the iconography and got their blessing and approval. The Seminoles are supported by the Seminole, right? The Blackhawks, it's a little more complicated, but the nations that are involved with that are, approve of the mascot and the story behind it. And there is like this legitimate, this is an honor and out of respect. What the Chiefs are doing, this kind of equivalent thing of the tomahawk chop, right, where they do this, and like, I was reading this story about as somebody who was a Native American in that area, was that, well, what's the chant? It's like, it's nonsense. No, like, come on, let me into the secret. What's the chant? And like, the person was ready to kill it's like, it's nonsense.
Yeah, it's made up. It's homogenizing. It's like all Native people rode horses and wear headdresses. No, they didn't. All Native peoples were warriors and had tomahawks and shot bows and arrows. No, they didn't. It's this very homogenizing effect that continues to perpetuate these ongoing problematic and harmful stereotypes that for some reason white people, particularly white men, do not want to let go of.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Malcontents, you could go ahead and vote for your favorite story, and Jennifer and I will work. Oh, that was beautiful. It bounced right off the lens. I finally got one. Yes. Great moment in Jewish sports history. And you get to pick the story that you like the most. We're going to do a little pause for the cause, and then we're going to go into our next segment.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee Northwest is located in Shoreline, Washington on Highway 99. They're on the west side of the highway. They're open Monday through Saturday, so they won't be open tomorrow. They have been shifting their hours around, so I always tell people, look on the Facebook page or look on their website, because we don't want to have people go up there and then leave with tears in their eyes because they're closed. Jennifer, they have amazing coffee, and of course, I got to call it out. Get the potato scone.
Yes. This also seems like a good time for us to do our kind of shout out to Black History Month.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to, you can go right ahead.
Yeah, so this week I'm sharing, and the mods, our wonderful mods, have the link to this that they're going to share with you in the comments. And it's part of the Seattle Civil Rights and Labor History Project, and it's called the Seattle Black Panther Party History and Memory Project. And it's just this kind of really great collection of video interviews, photos, news coverage, congressional hearings, bulletins, like a brief history, and a film. And it's really informative and gives you like a very nuanced understanding of the things the Black Panther Party were doing in Seattle and their longer history. I had a chance to listen to Aaron Dixon speak on the UW campus about 5 years ago when he came out with his book, and it was a really powerful and like very moving dialogue. So I urge you guys to take a look at all of this, watch some of the interviews, go through the news coverage, and learn a little bit more about the Black Panther Party, because a lot of times they're often portrayed in a negative light as antithetical to what MLK stood for, when it's really not. And they did a lot of really great things for the community. So I hope this is a very useful resource for some of you, and you got something good out of it.
Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate you bringing that to us. And I really like what you're doing for us in Black History Month. If you're not familiar, we had talked about this on Monday, because that was February 1st. Jennifer and I both felt that as white allies, we have no business standing up here and doing educational pieces around Black History Month, because we're not Black. And so what we're doing instead is highlighting pieces that you can go out and watch, read, learn from, to learn more about Black history on your own. Everybody say hi to Yoda. Yoda, say hi to everybody. And